The provincial government plans to introduce legislation that will amend the definition of interpersonal violence. It will include coercive or controlling behaviour, online stalking, and harassment. It was announced in the throne speech last week. And in an internet and social media age, there's more and more victims and survivors. They're facing online stalking and harassment as part of that pattern of intimate partner violence. In Saskatchewan, dating violence is actually a particular issue. The RCMP reported that more than a quarter of violent crime committed in their jurisdiction in 2024 was intimate personal violence. Their data shows that people in dating relationships were more often victims of intimate partner violence, making up 60% of reported victims last year. If you combine that with ex-partners, that number goes up to 81%. Today on Blue Sky, we'll hear from a survivor of intimate partner violence and from an organization that advocates for victims and survivors that long has been calling for the recognition of coercive control. We also want to hear from you. What more could be done to support those dealing with intimate partner violence, and what needs to be done to stop it? Call 1-800-716-2221 or email us bluesky@cbc.ca. So we know the province has these plans, but we don't have a lot more details than that, or any idea when it might happen. Here's what Scott Moe, our premier, told reporters when he was asked about it last week.
As we move into introducing the actual legislation, you will see the details on and ultimately into committee on the regulations that are involved in many of these bills that are here. But whether it be bills related to poisonous drugs that are coming into our community, or whether it be bills related to interpersonal violence. It's about supporting people that at times, often due to no error of their own, have found themselves in a very dangerous and precarious situation in their life. And if this government is going to stand here and talk about how important it is to continue to strengthen our Saskatchewan economy, I think it's incumbent on us to talk about what we've heard from the people we represent, families across this province, and how we're going to ensure that there are supports in place, in this case for individuals that are in maybe a domestic violence situation, which all too often are women. We've seen previous investments and raising the profile of this, what is very much a challenge in our society, and how we as a government are working with community-based organizations to support them, whether it be through, I've visited Sophia's house, we've done a shelter in Melfort, as well as in recent years, and I think in collaboration to some degree, even with the opposition, we were able to move into funding some of the operations of our second stage shelters in this province, really a first in the nation. What you're going to see now is some enabling legislation to ensure that the government of Saskatchewan can go further in supporting individuals that may be in a situation where they're exposed to domestic violence. And that, I think we need to be able to say are priorities of a government that is, working at continuing to have the strongest economy in Canada. What is that economy doing for you? This is what it's doing.
That was Premier Scott Moe speaking to the media last week around the throne speech. This is the same Sask Party government that implemented Clare's Law in Saskatchewan in 2020, the first province to do so. Clare's Law originated in the United Kingdom and is named for Claire Wood. In 2009, she was murdered by her ex-boyfriend in the greater Manchester area. And during the inquest into her death, it was revealed that her ex-boyfriend had a history of domestic abuse, which was recorded by police. Officially known as the Interpersonal Violence Disclosure Protocol Act, it gives police the power to disclose certain risk-related information to current or former intimate partner cases where it might help them make better decisions, informed decisions about the safety in their relationship. Then Justice Minister John Morgan said one particular high-profile domestic violence case had especially affected the Sask Party government in 2015. Lisa Strang, the party's longest-serving employee and its finance director, was shot twice from behind by her husband. John Strang did plead guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison with no parole for 17 years. So that's a little of the back history on Clare's Law in Saskatchewan. I did reach out to Saskatoon and Regina Police to find out if people are using this as a resource, because when it happened, there was a lot of concern that there was people going to be looking into information that was none of their business. They were very concerned about personal rights. So Saskatoon Police provided me with the following numbers. Between 2020 and Friday, which is when they got back to me, they had 39 total requests for information through Clare's Law. 5 in 2020, 12 in 2021, 7 in 2022, 6 in 2023, 8 in 2024, and 1 year to date so far in 2025. In Regina, it's a very similar picture, though the numbers vary over the years. 3 cases in 2020, 8 in 2021, 8 in 2022, 5 in 2023, 11 in 2024, and 2 so far year to date for a total of 37. We want to hear from you today as we're having this conversation. Do you think adding forms of abuse like online stalking and harassment to the definition of interperson violence will do enough? Have you been impacted by it? We'd love for you to share your stories today. Call 1-800-716-2221 or email us bluesky@cbc.ca. Now, we know from previous conversations that Saskatchewan does have some of the highest rates of intimate partner violence in the country, but experts and advocates have warned that not all forms of that violence are recognized in criminal courts in our country. And that's why the Provincial Association of Transitions Houses and Services of Saskatchewan, known as PATHS, and will be referred to as PATHS because I will stumble over that for the rest of the show, has long been calling for the recognition of coercive control. Crystal Giesbrecht is the Director of Research and Communications with PATHS. She is with me in our Regina studio. Welcome back to Blue Sky.
Good afternoon.
Okay, first, what was your reaction when you heard that this was something that they were going to address through the throne speech?
Very pleased. I think this is such a positive step for Saskatchewan, and I'm really glad to see coercive control being acknowledged in our definition of interpersonal violence here in the province. As you mentioned, we've been calling for the recognition of coercive control in Canada's criminal code. But by including this in the definition used in provincial legislation, we open up opportunities for safety and support for people who are experiencing non-physical forms of violence as well.
Talk to me about what coercive control is, because it sounds like a big word, but it also covers a lot of things.
Absolutely. So there's a few different definitions, and my favorite definition actually is the one that the Saskatchewan Police Commission has in their domestic violence risk indicator checklist. So I'll give you that definition. And they say that coercive control may include acute jealousy, degradation, micro-regulation of daily life, social isolation, disallowing independent thinking or decision-making, deprivation, surveillance, forced sex, sexual exploitation, shaming, forced adherence to a belief system that condones IPV, intimidation, and threats. It's important to recognize that perpetrators of coercive control will tailor their behavior to what will harm the victim most and what will be effective in that situation. Other parts of the pattern are often threats to harm animals or harm to animals, withholding medications, interfering with employment, economic abuse, and sometimes coercive controlling behaviors happen in conjunction with physical and sexual violence, but not always.
And this can happen for either gender.
Absolutely, yes. What we see from the research and from research or from data, from police-reported data in jurisdictions where coercive control is criminalized, beginning with the UK in 2015, overwhelmingly, perpetrators of coercive control are men and victims are women. Prosecutions in the UK, it's over 90% male perpetrators, and correspondingly, the majority of victims are women. However, like all forms of intimate partner violence, people of any gender can perpetrate or can experience violence. And the way this legislation and all of the services and supports are designed are so that they can be accessed by someone who is experiencing or at risk of violence, regardless of their gender.
I'm going to ask a sort of Pollyanna question, but do the perpetrators of coercive control maybe when they're starting out, do they know they're doing it? Or is it a slippery slope? Or are these things that are repeated patterns in all of their relationships based on the data you've seen?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it's a spectrum. I think people who perpetrate coercive control know very well what they're doing, and it's a very deliberate pattern of using things that will terrify, that will degrade, that will really knock their partner down so that they regain or maintain control of their partner, and their partner will not leave, will do what they want. They'll stay in the relationship. The perpetrator is getting their needs met. So I think in many relationships where there is violence and abuse, there's a spectrum of controlling behaviors, right? There's jealousy and the perpetrator not wanting the victim to do certain things or wanting to control their behavior. But I think when we see this extreme end of coercive control, perpetrators know very much what they're doing. And something that is really disturbing is, while this is very much something that isn't talked about, sometimes family and friends, coworkers don't always recognize. However, there are such similarities. Some of the examples of the behaviors we hear perpetrators using sound so strange and so specific, and you hear the stories and think, who would ever think of doing that to another person?
Give me an example of that.
Yeah, so some of the examples are perpetrators who will try to convince the victim that they are crazy.
Like gaslighting?
Yes, absolutely. Telling the victim, this didn't happen the way you remember it. Also, this happened because of your behavior. If you weren't behaving this way, if you weren't flying off the handle, this would not happen. But also setting things up, going to the victim's family and friends and saying, I'm worried about her. She's been behaving in a way that's making me concerned. I'm trying to get her help for her mental health and she won't take it. So sometimes really setting up a good public face and trying to appear caring and supportive and telling other people that the victim is the problem. So if the victim is brave enough to reach out for help, sometimes the perpetrator has set it up to kind of close off those supports or have people wondering if it's true.
Is there a typical picture of someone who is an abuser in this way? I ask this as someone who knows I have friends who've gone through very serious divorces, and coercive control was the main reason, but it was really impossible for her to get away and to get out. And to this day, despite a divorce, it's still a problem. And they were, quote unquote, a picture perfect family. So is there a way that you could identify this if you're seeing someone less? Or what are some of the signs that we might recognize if someone's going through that? Because had she not told us, we would have never known.
Absolutely. I think that is so common that perpetrators of coercive control can present a really great face, and you have neighbors, you have extended family saying, no, that they would never, or they were always great to me. And so I think some of the things, as you said, are recognizing sometimes when things are changing with the person who's in that relationship. Sometimes they're making excuses to not attend family things, not attend social things, because maybe when they go with friends or they, go for brunch with family members, their partner will make it so miserable for them and create such an issue that it's better to just not deal with it.
Home.
So sometimes the victim is saying, you know what, I have a headache, or you know what, I have too much work to do, I can't go. And it can seem like they're the problem. They never want to do anything. They're bailing on things. They're being flaky, but they're doing it to keep the peace and to protect their own safety. Sometimes it's also things like the victim being very different when their partner's in the room, not speaking up, not sharing opinions, not having control or access over their own financial or economic decision making. Things changing with work. Sometimes someone may be offered other opportunities or other things they can do at work, but they're declining those things because they have to get home and they can't do any extra work, or they're not trying to not rock the boat with their partner. So it's very diverse, and of course it's different in every situation. But some of those things can be changes with the victim's behavior that might make someone want to check in on a family or friend.
But so that's to identify a victim. But how do you identify a perpetrator? Because what I'm trying to understand is why someone would do this. Like, what kind of personality type is like, I want to treat you like an animal?
Yes, absolutely. That's the part that is extremely difficult to understand for people who don't use violence and abuse and who are maybe newer to this concept of coercive control. But I think perpetrators of violence use these behaviors because they work. If what they want is to terrify their partner into never leaving them, to terrify their partner into doing what they want and serving their needs, it works. Does it feel good to use violence and abuse? No. For the most part, it does not, and maybe people who are using the violence and abuse don't feel good about it, but it is getting their needs met in that way. And when what someone wants is to dominate and control and be in charge, I think it works for them. But it is hard to identify sometimes those individuals because there are people who are violent, who are aggressive in the workplace, in public, to extended family, to their wider circle. But others will be fantastic to everybody else. And that's someone who might be volunteering for their kids' team. They're shoveling the neighbor's walk. They have a leadership position at their faith institution. And people say, no, I can't believe that. They've never shown anything like that because this is a strategic choice to use violence against the victim within the confines of the home and not show that behavior outside. So it can be hard to identify.
That must be so frustrating to the victim in that case because and I don't know how long it takes to realize that you've lost yourself and that you've become this controlled shell of who you used to be, but to see them being so kind and so helpful to other people and then coming home and treating you this way. I know that there is people listening over their lunch hour right now, and there may be man or woman thinking, oh my gosh, this is what I'm going through. What do they do? What's your first step? Who do you call? What do you do? I don't know that. Do you tell a friend? Do you call? Like, what are the best first steps you could take?
Yeah, I think, it depends on what people feel comfortable with, but what the first step I would recommend is call one of PATH's member agencies. Those are domestic violence shelters and counseling centers in the province of Saskatchewan. All of the professionals who work at those agencies are aware of the dynamics of intimate partner violence and coercive control. They're trained in risk assessment. They're trained in safety planning. So whether or not someone is thinking about ending the relationship, making plans to leave, they might not be there. But even if you want to have a supportive conversation and say, this is what I'm dealing with. What do you think? That's someone to bounce that off of, to get an opinion.
To maybe validate your feelings.
Absolutely. Because sometimes when you say it out loud, that's when it becomes clear how bad it is and how serious it is. And sometimes just talking about those risk factors with a professional, going through a risk assessment, can really help to clarify and help someone decide what they want to do, what their next steps would be. And those professionals can help to make some strategies for safety, connect with some other resources and supports if needed. So that would be my first call.
I'm Sam McKeag. Today on Blue Sky, we are talking about the potential amendments to interpersonal violence law in Saskatchewan, changing those laws to include more things like coercive control, online harassment, and stalking, things that maybe weren't included in legislation before, to broaden definitions, to give victims more opportunity to get out of these situations and to have those perpetrators addressed in the court system. My guest is Crystal Giesbrecht. She is the Director of Research and Communications for Provincial Association of Transition Houses and Services of Saskatchewan, known as PATHs. And I'm going to get back to Crystal in just one moment. But first, we're going to hear from a survivor of interpersonal violence. Brenda Ottenbright knows the pain of coercive or controlling behavior all too well. It took her 9 years 9 years of legal wrangling to get a divorce from her 6-year marriage in April of 2023. She is still navigating the family court system to this day. She is a founding member of Safe Child Saskatchewan, which is a not-for-profit focused on the safety and rights of children.
Coercive control is the foundation of all abuse. And it really needs to be recognized. So I'm very grateful that it's happening. It is documented that coercive control is one of the founding factors, as well as strangulation, that leads to a 7-fold in homicide. So often coercive control, the reaction to the coercive control is what is noticed. So that's when you see women dysregulated, women and children dysregulated, when you have children that refuse to go to a parent's house. And then you have, in the last few years, we've had women jailed because children refuse to go to the other parent, but they don't look behind what is happening. I want to see how this is all laid out and how they plan on doing the training, so that it is recognized. So coercive control is a patterned behavior. Now we got to remember it's patterned behavior. It's not a one-off. It's a patterned behavior that exerts control over another, where the other person loses their autonomy, their voice, and their freedom. I want to see survivors feel safe. I want to see when we call us RCMP or we call the police, where we feel like we're being heard. I want to see where people who have young children and are in really horrible situations, when they say something, they're believed, and we don't have to go through 15 million hoops to get any kind of help. Do I think it's going to happen overnight? No. But I also want to see children that are my children's age, who are 16, 17 and younger, my grandchildren, who know what a healthy relationship is. Because right now, a lot of what we're modeling isn't. And what a lot of people need to understand is when 1 in 3 women are experiencing it, how many children do those women have? What are they seeing as normal? What's happening to those kids? I want to see children feel safe, and I want to feel safe. Bringing things out into the sunlight, bringing it to the surface, it's never a bad thing. All abuse is about control. It's about power over another person. It's about being in control. So coercive control is the foundation of all of it. You don't get the financial abuse, you don't get the emotional abuse, you don't get the sexual, the physical, without the need for control. Because it's about power over. When you are abused, you lose every sense of worth, of thinking that you matter. When you're going through a system that is like this, it reinforces the unworthiness and that we don't matter. It is dehumanizing. It is traumatizing. It is frustrating. It is not a safe place. The place that is supposed to be the safe place is probably the most unsafe place we can be.
That was Brenda Ottenbright. She's a founding member of Safe Child Saskatchewan, which is a not-for-profit focused on safety and rights of children. Crystal, what did you hear there from her?
Excellent points. I so appreciate Brenda's work, and I really appreciate so many of the things she highlighted there. Number one, being the impact on children when they are exposed to coercive controlling behaviors. And also, I really appreciate Brenda's advocacy and the way she's called attention to the experiences that survivors have in the legal system. That's something we're currently researching at Paths, and there are just so many things that she said and that we've been talking about today that we just hear again and again from survivors who have experienced coercive control and just spend years battling in the criminal court system, but the family court system with perpetrators for many years after separation. And I think it's so necessary to recognize that this form of abuse does not stop and often ramps up after separation.
Do you know from research and just anecdotally from all the women that you've spoken with, are children typically treated the same as the person being controlled, or are they separate from it? Like, did they know what's going on in their house with their parent that is the victim?
Yes, children absolutely know what's going on. You have some people who are abusive to their intimate partners. They're also deliberately abusive to their children. I think that's more common. Mm-hmm. You might have some individuals who maybe the children aren't the direct targets, but children are still being harmed because they're witnessing and they're exposed to their primary caregiver, most often, the victim parent, being abused, being degraded. And that, again, that pattern goes on and is often continuing after separation. So we have a family court system who says, okay, well, now you're not in the same home. Now you're separated. All should be well, should be safe for children. But it is not. And that harm continues.
Is a perpetrator capable of being, I'm going to use the word fixed because my brain's not working right now, but are they able to, redeem themselves? Are they able to, or is this, are they stuck this way?
My answer is a yes with a very large but.
Okay.
Not everyone will change. Not everyone wants to change. We have intervention programs in this province that offer treatment, support, programming for individuals who've used intimate partner violence. If someone buys in, engages, and wants to make positive changes, they can do that. But if someone's motivation is, I'm here because the judge told me to, I'm here because I want to get my partner back, or I actually don't think I'm the problem, I think it was all their fault, they're not going to change. Some individuals participate in treatment programs more than once and still don't successfully make changes to their behavior. So it's not enough to say someone went through the program, so now all is good and they're going to be an A-plus parent. Not necessarily. And I think when we look at, this is in Canada, but also worldwide, when we look at the research literature on treatments, it's unfortunately not too encouraging. But my theory on this is when we see, okay, most people who go through treatment do reoffend, who do have repeated criminal incidents generally, but recurrences of intimate partner violence. I think what we need to do is be looking at who is successful in treatment, because I think programming works well for some types of perpetrators, and I think you need different strategies and different ways to connect with people who are perpetrating coercive control and people who are perpetrating other forms of violence and abuse. So can people change? Absolutely, but you have to be putting in the work, and it takes time, and you have to be motivated for the right reasons.
Okay, I want to talk to you about financial abuse specifically, because it's one case where it could be the only thing they're doing, but it also is one of the most devastating things that can happen, that financial freedom and financial abuse. Can you speak a little bit more to that for people who maybe don't know what financial abuse is?
Yes, absolutely. There can be different parts to this or different ways it's enacted. So sometimes the victim survivor is not allowed to work outside of the home. They have no income of their own. Sometimes they do work. Sometimes they are the one who is actually earning the money for the family and the perpetrator isn't. But what is happening is the perpetrator is controlling access to funds, is controlling the family's bank account. Sometimes the survivor is closely monitored, what they can spend for groceries, what they can spend on gas, what they can spend for children's needs. And sometimes another form of economic abuse as well is interfering with employment. So sometimes perpetrators are, depending on the kind of job, sometimes if someone works in a restaurant, for example, their partner will sit there and drink coffee all day and just be miserable and make it so uncomfortable. I've heard survivors say, I quit my job because I thought I was going to get fired because of my partner's behavior. And so there's that as well that also results in a similar outcome of survivors not having access to money. How do you plan to leave? How do you pay a damage deposit on a new place if you have no income? How do you go to a shelter in the next town if you can't even put a full tank of gas in your vehicle?
Or you don't have a car.
Or you don't have a vehicle at all, right? So it's a really insidious form of abuse. And it also just all of the little things, right? Like being able to make choices over what kind of toiletries you would use, or purchasing clothes, or being able to have a cup of coffee with your coworkers. You can't do that if you don't have money or if your partner is monitoring you to that extent. So it's not just about the money, it's about the freedom, and huge implications for survivors being able to start over safely after getting out of the relationship.
I know someone right now, male, who is in a situation where his wife controls absolutely everything for the finances, and he can't leave. He's like, I won't see my kids. I cannot get her to give me any money. I can't create a savings account. He's like, and I'm a man. Like, how are people going to believe that this person takes all the money I make and just gives me an allowance? Like, that seems unfathomable even to him. He's like, even saying it out loud seems absolutely ridiculous. So he just lives with it because he wants to see his kids every day and all of these other things. So you end up, male or female, you end up in that because you don't want to tear your family apart either.
So often it's a consideration, I think, that even if, you'll have shared parenting and you'll both have access to children after separation, no one wants to not be with their kids every day. No one wants to do a half the week or an every second. It's extremely difficult, right? And for survivors who've been taking care of their children's daily needs, protecting them, doing all of that as well, the thought of not being there to be able to maintain that and being able to provide those things for their children is really too difficult of a choice to make sometimes.
Well, it might even feel like you're putting yourself before your kids. When you've only put your kids ahead of yourself for all this time, it's really hard to flip that script and say, I can't care for them properly until I take care of myself, because all you've done is take care of them.
Yes, you've articulated that so well.
We want to hear from you. If you're listening in, the number to call, 1-800-716-2221, or email us bluesky@cbc.ca. And you can send us an email if you'd rather stay anonymous, and maybe you have a question for Crystal about resources or something she can point you to. We're happy to take that call or to take those emails. Again, the number 1-800-716-2221, or email us bluesky@cbc.ca. I want to talk about changing this definition. Up until now, what has it meant for victims and survivors that coercive control, online stalking, harassment has not been part of the legislation?
Yes. So what is considered, interpersonal violence, as we have in our provincial legislation, is more broad, violence between people. So it could be family members, sexual assault from a non-partner, etc. What I deal with and what I'm talking about today is intimate partner violence. But so when our definition of interpersonal violence did not include coercive control, then we're mostly thinking of the things that would be a criminal offense, physical violence and harassment, things that are already kind of on the books as a criminal form of violence. That means that when someone is experiencing coercive control, but no other forms of violence, they don't have access to some of the things that would protect them. And I think one that I'm really excited about is the provisions within the Victims of Interpersonal Violence Act, which one of the things there are emergency intervention orders, which is a temporary order that can allow a victim to stay in the home with their children, with their pets, regain access or retain access to vehicle, to money, all these things that has to get sorted out later, but allows that temporary measure for a victim to stay in their home if they feel safe, doing so with provisions that their partner cannot contact them. as it stands, you wouldn't be able to access those with our more narrow definition of interpersonal violence. So by expanding this, I think that's one opportunity that opens it up. But other pieces of provincial legislation that also refer to interpersonal violence, now we're looking at coercive control as well and making those things available to more victims and survivors.
Okay. Are there challenges that you could be facing with this in maybe how it's been implemented elsewhere? Have there been any issues?
Not to my knowledge. I think going back to what Brenda said in her comments is it's necessary to have training for professionals. So this is something that has been apparent when coercive control has been criminalized in the United Kingdom, in Scotland, New South Wales, and elsewhere, is really necessary to have police, but also prosecutors, judges, domestic violence professionals, everyone within the system to be on the same page in their understanding of what coercive control is and how it looks and how to recognize it. I think same thing goes for implementing this in our provincial definition as well. Is it's important for everyone to understand what we're talking about when we're talking about coercive control, and to be having the same shared language and definitions. But I think it's a win, I think, having this amendment to the definition, first of all, to provide support to victims and survivors, but also this gets us talking about it. This increases public awareness of what coercive control is, and I think that's also helping.
Okay, I want to go to the phones. We have Charles on the line in Saskatoon. Charles, go ahead.
Good afternoon, ladies. I must say this has been a profoundly rewarding conversation, listening in from the airport all the way home.
Oh, thank you.
I just want to say well done for those to you ladies. And I also wanted to introduce maybe a point of view. In the conversation about coercive control, I see that the dynamics is majorly for Caucasian and Canadian families. I was hoping that if that conversation could include or factor in the dynamics of immigrant families. A lot of us, having immigrated to Canada, we're coming with some cultural baggage from where we're coming from. Some dynamics that kind of by default deny women some rights. And upon migrating here, that union is tested by issues like this. So my it's more like a humble request. In the conversation about this, please factor in immigrant families, especially the ones of African descent, because I think a lot is going on there, and it'd be nice to make their voices heard as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for the conversation.
Charles, thanks so much. I think that's a really good point, coming from cultures that are different from Western white culture, particularly some Muslim communities, African communities. They come over with culture. They're trying to integrate into Western society, but also trying to keep their culture from home. And as he said, may have some baggage. How does that play into support? And what if they don't know what they're experiencing is something that they shouldn't be?
Absolutely. I really appreciate Charles calling in with those comments. And that's very true, and I think clear from what our member agencies see with the survivors they support, and also the survivors who are new to Canada that have participated in research that I've conducted here. And some of the things, like I was saying, how perpetrators will really tailor the behavior to what is going to work, what is going to be the most harmful or the worst threat they can impose on the victim, whether it's animals or children or other things. But absolutely, there's cultural aspects to that, where things that may seem or that would never happen in some of our families may be normal, whether they're okay or not, but things that have been normalized,
your whole
right?
life.
Yes, things that are just part of the family you grew up in, or the culture or the context. And so these examples, that's why I think we need a lot of examples to understand coercive control. And those are things that are important in training for professionals too, to have case studies. I have a lot of quotes from survivors of ways they've experienced it, or ways that the experience has impacted them, because it is absolutely different for everyone, but then you add there's that cultural context as well. So excellent point from Charles.
I have another caller on the line. Jocelyn is on the road. I'm assuming Jocelyn has pulled over. Jocelyn, go ahead.
Hi. So I am a victim and survivor of domestic violence, and I currently work in a domestic violence shelter for women and children fleeing domestic violence. In fact, I have had to utilize that exact same shelter for myself about a decade prior. So we happen to own a family company, as it is called, but it was his company, and I was not allowed to work outside of the home. I was forced to work in secretarial positions and be his labor hand and never getting paid. After child number 1, I discovered that the Canada Child Benefit needed to go into an account that he didn't have access to. So I did make steps way back then to have a little bit of a stipend available, an account he didn't have access to in a city that he rarely went to. And when it took probably 7 to 10 times to leave before I actually had the emotional breakdown and mental health breakdown where I was forced to leave. It was for the safety of the kids, and social services said, if you're not going to leave, we're going to get the kids out. So push came to shove, and then once I was out, it became whoever controlled the money controls the narrative. So I went through a whole heck of a lot of hell where I kept my narrative silent because he owned and operated a company. And if he wasn't earning an income, then any little bit of child support that he was ordered to provide me would not come. And so I kept silent. I still kept my narrative mostly to myself or my close friends until just recently I was like, you know what, enough is enough. And so when people say they stay because they don't know what to expect if they leave, it's the devil you know or the devil you don't. But for me, once I left, I came to the realization that why the heck was I living with the devil?
How is life on the other side of things, Jocelyn? Like how different is your life now?
Oh, it is night and day. I took control of my mental health, got the trauma treatment I needed, keep my mental health in check. I live with PTSD, and if I don't get enough sleep, then I go off. I can't function.
Are your kids okay? I think so many people think about the kids. Are your kids okay?
It's hard to say. It's really hard to say because there is still a significant portion of parental alienation going on. And even though it's deemed as not parental alienation, when there is a normal parent being villainized and the children see the villain as the good person and the terrible behaviors that are examples or just acceptable, whereas the normal healthy parent is seen as the villain, there's still parental alienation, and there just isn't enough there isn't enough resources to diagnose, essentially, parental alienation. And so the best I can do is just make sure that when the kids do reject me, the healthier parent, that I don't reject them, right? I keep showing up. I keep showing that I am always there. I will always be there. And the first time any child says, I hate you, it hurts. And you don't want to become adapted to it, but you got to grow a thicker skin because you know that they're just repeating what the abuser is saying to them. And it shouldn't be said to them. There should be a way of stopping it, but what happens in people's homes you have no control over. So just keeping the emotion out of it, and just letting the kids know, like, well, that hurts my heart, and I don't want anybody to say that they hate you or for them to hurt your heart like you're hurting mine. We want to be kind to people. That keeps if you keep the emotions level and at a baseline, then the kids realize that they're not going to get a reaction out of you. They're not going to get a positive or negative reaction specifically. So they end up not doing it because why?
Yeah.
There's no
Jocelyn,
reaction.
This has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your story. We're literally 30 seconds from the end of the show, but I so appreciate you calling in, and I wish you so much luck through the rest of this journey.
Oh, it'll be forever, but it'll be worth it.
Thank you so much. That was Jocelyn on the road, a victim and survivor of coercive control, which was our topic today. Crystal Giesbrecht, thank you so much for coming in. I feel like we could have talked about this all afternoon.
There's a lot to say, but some other time we'll pick up other aspects of this. But thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. She's the Director of Research and Communications at the Provincial Association of Transition Houses and Services of Saskatchewan. Thanks for listening.